Hello, I'm professional attorney and very much amateur musician Scott Lesowitz, and Rick Beato recently released a video about how nowadays it seems that songs often have a ridiculous number of people listed as being co-writers. Talks about a Coldplay song recently that came out that 15 co-authors. And so I thought this would be a good time to make a quick video about the law of joint authorship in copyright and how that might be incentivizing this boom in number of co-authors and songs. And if I have enough time, I'll talk about how joint authorship, if used correctly according to my plan, will immediately achieve world peace and an end to world hunger, but that's only if I have enough time at the end of the video. Okay, so generally when there are multiple songwriters, they will have signed a written agreement laying out their shares of the ownership in the song and what rights they have to the song, if any. So one big reason is that in the absence of a signed written agreement, when there are joint authors in a song, each author becomes a co-owner of the song and they each receive an equal interest in the song regardless of the extent or quality of their contribution. And also each author can, by themselves, without the other author's permission, grant non-exclusive licenses for use of the song. However, if they do so, they will, for any revenue collected on the licenses, they'll have to share it with their co-authors according to their share of the ownership of the song. So this means that by default, if 10 people each wrote a song, they would each receive a 10% share of the song. They'd each be entitled to 10% of any licensing revenue for the song, and that would be regardless of whether they were the main contributors or, not the main contributors. Another incentive to make more people co-writers and sign written agreements with them is that the minimum creative contribution for someone to be found a joint author is small. So how little does the creative contribution have to be for someone to be treated as a joint author as opposed to something less like the drummer, for instance? So it just has to be some original creation that is more than a trivial contribution, or in fancy legal Latin talk, de minimis. There also is an intent requirement to finding joint authorship, but at a minimum, the people claiming to be songwriters must all intend that they each creatively contribute to the writing of the song. And most courts will also require some type of intent that they be joint authors, although not necessarily in the legal sense. They don't have to intend to be joint authors under the law. But there is legal support that music producers and engineers can, at least at times, be joint authors. Therefore, it can be better legally to get everyone who conceivably might be deemed a joint author, such as a producer, an engineer, and get them to sign an agreement as to their rights, if any, to the song, and perhaps make them a joint author, but give them a small percentage. And depending on the consequences, it doesn't have to necessarily be a joint authorship agreement. If appropriate, there can be a signed written work for hire agreement, for instance, if the factors for that are met, because if someone makes a work for hire, they will not own any copyright to it by default. That said, the law I'm talking about is not new. So in reality, I think that the changes in the music business and how music is made are probably the primary drivers in increase in the number of co-writers, whether it be changes in how music is produced, changes in the number of people involved in creating a song, the use of sampling, the rise of streaming, making publishing rights more important, the value of songwriting catalogs exploding, incentivizing more and more people to demand even a small percentage of the writing credit. Anyway, all right, with that, sorry that ran a little longer than I wanted, so I won't be able to tell you how to quickly solve world peace and hunger. So anyway, take care.